The frequency that finds you. Introduction. Imagine a world where every restless thought, every lingering doubt, and every silent ache inside you is not a problem to fix, but a signal to follow, a frequency uniquely tuned to your soul's deepest truth. The frequency that finds you isn't just another self-help book filled with empty promises or quick fixes. It's a transformational journey into the hidden energy that shapes your reality, your mindset, and your power to create lasting change. Drawing from timeless wisdom, cutting-edge psychology, and soulful storytelling, this book meets you where you are, whether you feel lost, stuck, or simply hungry for more, and shows you how to listen beneath the noise, reclaim your personal power, and align with the life you were always meant to live. If you're ready to stop chasing external validation and start tuning into the frequency that already exists inside you, this book will become your guide, your mirror, and your catalyst. Prepare to uncover the voice you've been silencing, awaken the energy that moves your world, and finally step into the clarity, courage, and joy waiting on the other side of your deepest listening. Chapter 1. The Voice Beneath the Noise. She didn't even notice the tears until they landed on the counter, a quiet rhythm against cold marble, as if her soul had been trying to speak in droplets long before she gave it permission. Just like millions of us who carry a voice inside we've never really listened to. Aaron was 34, a marketing director in Los Angeles, always surrounded by noise. Meetings, deadlines, demos, the endless scroll of curated lives whispering, "You're behind." She had spent years performing competence, saying yes to things she never wanted, building a life that looked impressive from the outside, but felt hollow at its core. That morning, after a promotion that should have made her proud, she stood in the mirror and whispered, "Why do I feel like I'm disappearing?" That whisper, that quiet, aching signal is where everything begins. Because before we change our lives, we have to hear the life that's already calling us from within. The truth is, you're not broken. You're buried under layers of expectation, noise, distraction, and narratives you didn't write but have been living anyway. You were born with a frequency so unique, the universe tuned it only to you, and when you start to feel off, anxious, lost, or stuck, it's not failure, it's feedback. It's your inner instrument warning. You're out of tune with your truth. Most of us have confused performance with purpose, thinking if we just do enough, achieve enough, look happy enough, we'll finally arrive somewhere that feels like peace. But the soul doesn't speak in trophies. It speaks in energy, in restlessness, in quiet knowing. And when your external world no longer matches your internal resonance, the discomfort is not your enemy, it's your compass. The voice beneath the noise isn't asking you to destroy everything. It's asking you to remember what you forgot. That you don't have to earn your worth by proving your pain, and you don't need permission to live in alignment. It's about retuning, listening, slowing down enough to hear what's been calling you all along. This isn't just about mindset, it's about frequency. Just like a radio, your life starts shifting when you stop scanning and lock onto the signal that feels like home. And home is never a place. It's a state of being where what you believe, feel, speak, and do all vibrate in harmony. Some people will call it presence. Others will call it peace. But you'll know it as clarity without force. Because when you're in your right frequency, you stop fighting for space. You become space. People feel it. Rooms respond to it. Reality bends toward it. But first, you have to get quiet enough to hear that voice you've been avoiding. The one that doesn't yell, but insists. The one that doesn't flatter, but frees. The one that says, "You are not too late. You are not too lost. You are right on time for yourself." So this chapter isn't about answers. It's about the beginning of your listening. A kind of sacred silence that isn't empty, but a life filled with signals that guide you back. And the question it leaves you with is this: if you turned down the volume of the world, what would you finally hear inside yourself? Chapter 2. When the world feels too loud. There are days when you're not sure if the chaos is outside of you or inside you, when every ping, post, and piece of news feels like it's tearing at the edge of your nervous system, and you can't tell if the ache in your chest is anxiety or just your soul begging for quiet. Tyler had one of those days. A Brooklyn subway train, packed shoulder to shoulder, earbuds in, notifications piling up, texts from his boss, his girlfriend, his mother, all wanting something. And yet, none of it felt real. He described it later as being in a blender with the lid off, everything loud, swirling, disconnected, like his spirit was trying to speak but couldn't get a word in. That's what happens when the volume of the world gets turned up so high, you forget what your own thoughts sound like. We're all carrying too much stimulus and not enough stillness, chronic input, zero integration. We consume opinions, judgments, likes, updates, and timelines, but rarely pause long enough to ask, what's mine? What's true? What actually matters? In a culture addicted to speed and attention, silence is treated like failure. But the soul doesn't thrive in speed. It speaks in stillness. When the world feels too loud, it's not just about noise, it's about disconnection. The disconnection from your body, your breath, your intuition, your center. That disconnection becomes emotional static, and the more you ignore it, the more you start living as a reaction to life rather than a creation of it. You say yes to avoid conflict. You scroll to escape feeling. You chase goals that don't light you up because it's what you're supposed to do. But none of that brings you home. Here's the truth no one talks about. Sensitivity isn't weakness, it's intelligence. If the world feels too loud to you, it might mean you're finally waking up to your frequency. You're not broken for needing boundaries. You're not dramatic for protecting your peace. You're tuned in, and tuning out the noise is how you find the signal. Begin noticing the moments that drain your light. Notice the people whose words don't match their energy. Notice how your body responds before your mind rationalizes. Your nervous system knows before you do. Every moment of overwhelm is a clue, a whisper. You're not supposed to be everything to everyone. The loudness outside only has power when there's silence inside that hasn't been honored. So don't fill your quiet with distraction. Fill it with alignment. When life gets too loud, that's not your cue to get louder. It's your call to go deeper. Find the ground. Breathe into your chest. Get honest about what's not working. You don't owe anyone a version of you that costs you your peace. You are allowed to pause. You are allowed to unplug. You are allowed to recalibrate until the world you're building actually reflects the frequency of the soul you've been silencing. And when you do, you'll notice something miraculous. The world doesn't fall apart. When you stop shouting, it starts responding to your stillness. So here's what I leave you with. What if the noise is not your enemy, but the invitation to finally hear yourself again? Chapter 3. The power hidden in stillness. It wasn't until Elijah lost everything that he finally heard the silence, and it terrified him. His job gone, his relationship over, his calendar empty for the first time in years. He found himself sitting alone in a small cabin in northern Oregon, surrounded by pine trees that didn't rush, didn't compete, didn't apologize for their stillness. At first, the quiet felt like failure, like the world had left him behind. But something strange began to happen in that space where the noise used to be. He started to feel. Not the kind of feeling that scrolls or tweets or gets distracted with. Hustle, but the kind that creeps into your bones when nothing is left to prove. That's when he realized stillness wasn't punishment. It was power. In a culture addicted to motion, productivity, and noise, We've forgotten that stillness isn't passive. It's profoundly active. It listens. It senses. It aligns. We've confused being busy with being valuable, as if our worth is tied to how loud, fast, or full our lives appear. But the deepest transformations don't happen in the spotlight. They happen in the pause between who we were and who we're becoming. Just like a seed doesn't grow in chaos, your spirit needs quiet soil to awaken its frequency. And yet, most people fear stillness because it reveals what they've been avoiding. It holds a mirror to our inner landscape, the buried grief, the suppressed dreams, the truths we negotiated away just to be accepted. But here's the thing. Clarity is born in stillness. Decisions sharpen. Energy returns. Your body remembers its rhythm. Your mind breathes. Your intuition speaks louder than fear. Stillness isn't the absence of progress. It's the birthplace of aligned progress. The world teaches you to react, to move faster when things fall apart. But your soul invites you to be still and know. Not know the outcome, but know yourself. The self that exists beyond roles, titles, trauma, and timelines. This chapter is an invitation to stop outsourcing your inner compass to the chaos around you. Because your highest frequency can't be heard through noise. It's always been a whisper. And in that stillness, you don't become less. You become more you, the real you. The one you've drowned out with schedules and screens and survival. The you who doesn't need to be loud to be powerful. The you who is strong enough to sit in silence and trust that the right answers will rise. And the truth is, most breakthroughs don't roar. They unfold quietly in moments when your heart softens just enough to receive. So if life has brought you to a pause, don't rush to fill it. Stay. Listen. Let it hold you. The power you're seeking isn't in doing more. It's in hearing what your spirit is already trying to say. Because stillness doesn't mean nothing is happening. It means everything is aligning. And the question this chapter leaves in your hands is, what would rise within you if you gave yourself permission to stop and truly listen for once, not to the world, but to the pulse of your own soul? Chapter 4. Retuning the signal of self. It wasn't the heartbreak that broke him. It was the silence that followed. After Julian's divorce, he found himself walking into a house that no longer echoed his laughter, only the hum of appliances, and the distant hum of his own numbness. He sat on the edge of his bed, each night like a ghost in his own life, scrolling through photos he wasn't in anymore, surrounded by things he once thought defined him, his career plaques, his custom suits, the watch he bought to celebrate his first six-figure year. But none of it rang true anymore. And that's the moment many of us face, whether it's after a breakup, a burnout, or a quiet awakening. We realize we've been living on someone else's frequency. We've been reacting to what the world rewards instead of responding to what our spirit needs and the deeper truth. We can't rise into the life that's meant for us if we're still vibrating at the frequency of survival, of people-pleasing, of borrowed identities. Retuning the signal of self doesn't mean becoming someone new. It means peeling off the static we've mistaken for personality, the sarcasm that masks pain, the ambition that hides emptiness, the constant doing that keeps us from simply being. It's the process of remembering your original signal before the world told you who you needed to become. Imagine yourself as an instrument finely built, uniquely voiced, but knocked out of tune by years of emotional weather. What do you do when your guitar strings fall flat? You don't throw it away. You adjust. You listen. You tighten or loosen. Slowly, gently, until the sound feels honest again. That's what this journey is. An unlearning. A soft turning inward. A recalibration of values, beliefs, and energy. Sometimes it looks like setting boundaries you once feared. Sometimes it feels like loneliness before it feels like peace. But every step you take toward resonance is a step away from self-abandonment. And yes, there will be resistance. There will be people who liked you better when you were pretending. There will be parts of you that try to pull you back into the noise because the static is familiar. But don't mistake familiar for aligned. The real you isn't hiding. You're just tuned into a version of life that can't hear your depth. So pause, breathe, drop beneath the surface of your routines. What thoughts feel heavy? What stories drain you? What desires keep showing up in your quietest moments? That's your signal speaking. It's not always loud, but it's always true. You were never meant to be background music in your own life. You're the melody. You're the instrument and the song. And every time you act from truth instead of fear, every time you choose rest over rush, boundaries over burnout, authenticity over applause, you retune yourself back to the original frequency that knows exactly who you are. The shift isn't immediate, but it's unmistakable. You start to feel lighter, realer. You start to speak and move in ways that don't require performance, and people will notice. Not everyone will celebrate it, but those who do will be the ones who were always meant to walk with you. So here's the question to sit with as this chapter closes. If your soul had its own radio station, would you be listening or just playing static on repeat because it's what you've always known? Chapter 5. The Truth That Scares You First. There's a moment when the truth finally arrives, not softly, not politely, but like a gust of wind that slams the door shut behind you, leaving you face to face with what you've spent years avoiding. For Marcus, it was a simple sentence from his 9-year-old daughter. "You're always here, but you're never with me." He smiled reflexively, as adults do, masking the sting. But inside, something cracked open, because she wasn't wrong. He had built a fortress of busyness, layering work, errands, emails, and obligations so tightly around him that presence had become a stranger. And beneath all the excuses, "I'm doing this for the family. This is just a season. I'm trying my best," was a truth he didn't want to face. He had no idea who he was without constant motion. And that's the truth that scares us first, the one that suggests our exhaustion is self-created, that our suffering is familiar, because it protects us from change, that healing requires the death of who we've pretended to be. This is where most people turn back, not because they're weak, but because transformation doesn't begin with peace. It begins with disruption. The moment you admit you're not okay, not fulfilled, not aligned, you risk unraveling everything that once made you feel secure. But here's what no one tells you. The scariest truths are always doorways. They are not punishments. They are wake-up calls from the soul, saying, what you built was for survival, but now you're being called to live. And yes, it's terrifying to dismantle a life that's functional but not fulfilling. But the longer you run from the truth, the heavier the mask becomes. You start smiling with your mouth, but not your eyes. You show up, but leave your spirit at the door. And eventually, your body begins to revolt through anxiety, fatigue, addiction, disconnection, trying to scream what your voice won't say. This isn't working. The truth that scares you first is the one that sets you free last. It's the admission that maybe the dream you chased isn't your dream anymore. That maybe some people you love can't come with you where you're going. That maybe, just maybe, your real life begins the moment you stop trying to make everyone else comfortable. And in that honesty, in that raw, vulnerable space, something else happens to a stillness. Not the stillness of defeat, but of clarity. You begin to see the map was always inside you. That you've never been lost, just listening to the wrong frequency. And now, finally, you can hear it. The truth is that fear isn't the enemy. Avoidance is. Fear is just the sensation of growth pressing against your comfort zone. It's the spiritual friction between who you were and who you're becoming. And if you can stay with it, breathe through it, not run from it, and you'll find something astonishing on the other side. The truth you were terrified of will become the truth that saves you. Because once you name your truth, you reclaim your power. You start choosing differently, speaking up, letting go, creating boundaries, calling your energy back. That first truth might shake you, but it's supposed to. It's how the soul says, "Wake up, this isn't your final form." So let this chapter be your mirror, not your judgment. Let it be the space where you stop performing clarity and finally admit confusion. Because healing doesn't begin with pretending. It begins with a single whisper of truth, followed by a pause, and then the courage to not run away. And so I leave you here at the edge of your next truth with one question that has the power to change everything. What are you pretending not to know? Chapter 6. Echoes of Who You Used to Be. There's a moment most people don't talk about, the moment when the life you've outgrown starts calling you back. Not because you want it, but because you haven't fully released it. Maya stood alone in her old bedroom, visiting her childhood home in Vermont after nearly a decade away, and it felt like stepping into a time capsule of someone she used to be. The faded posters, the crooked bookshelf, the dusty journals under the bed, each one a whisper from a former self, still echoing in the corners. And isn't that how it happens? We evolve, we heal, we grow, but remnants remain. Memories that loop without warning. Habits we thought we buried that resurface in silence. Versions of us we swore we'd never be again showing up in the mirror. On hard days. The truth is, transformation isn't a clean break. It's a layered unraveling, and often the past doesn't die quietly. It echoes. It tests you. It asks, do you still belong here? And if we're not intentional, those echoes can trap us. We start responding to life from outdated programming, reacting from wounds that are no longer open but still sensitive, making decisions through the lens of a self we no longer recognize. This is why emotional residue matters. You can outgrow a relationship, a city, a belief, but unless you clear the emotional frequency that was attached to it, it lives on in your energy. And energy is what the universe responds to. That's why you may feel like you've done all the right things, read the books, gone to therapy, said the affirmations, but still feel stuck in the same emotional loops. Because growth isn't just about adding new things. It's about releasing the invisible weight of the old ones. Sometimes that weight isn't even yours. It's inherited. It's borrowed. It's who you had to be to survive a time that no longer exists. So what happens when those versions of you start resurfacing? You pause. You honor them. You listen without judgment. Because those echoes aren't mistakes. They're milestones. Evidence that you made it through. Evidence that you made it through. They remind you who you were before. The world told you who to be. But then, you don't stay there. You don't dance with ghosts. You release them with reverence. You remind yourself, I am allowed to change. I am allowed to shed layers that once served me. I am allowed to stop answering to an identity that no longer fits. You are not obligated to keep performing a role just because you played it well. The frequency of who you used to be is not your punishment. It's your checkpoint. And when it shows up, it's an invitation. Will you shrink to what's familiar or expand into what's true? Real alignment means releasing even the parts of yourself you once loved, if they are no longer in harmony with your present becoming. Because your future self isn't waiting for you to be perfect. It's waiting for you to be honest. And in this chapter of your journey, the greatest act of strength might not be moving forward. It might be letting go of the echo before it becomes your soundtrack. So pause, breathe, and ask, what version of me am I still answering to? And is it time to turn the page? Chapter 7. Becoming the energy you seek. There was a moment when Jason finally understood what everyone had been trying to tell him, not in words, but through his own exhaustion, his repeated relationships, and the slow decay of joy in everything he used to love. It wasn't that the world was giving him bad energy. It was that he had forgotten he was the source. For years, he blamed his circumstances, the draining job, the emotionally unavailable partners, the city that never slowed down, the goals that never felt like enough. But one morning, after yet another sleepless night pacing through his apartment in Denver, it hit him. He had become a magnet for chaos because he was living in chaos. He wanted peace but made no space for it. He wanted love but feared vulnerability. He wanted to feel free, but every day he carried the weight of unresolved pain, doubt, and shame in his chest like armor. And in that still gray morning light, standing barefoot in the kitchen with a mug he never finished, Jason realized the truth we all resist. You don't attract what you want, you attract what you are. The frequency you emit shapes the frequency you receive. This isn't law of attraction fluff, it's energetic physics. Your tone, your beliefs, your presence, these ripple into every interaction, every room, every result. If you keep meeting resistance, it may not be punishment, it might be a mirror. And if your life feels like it's always lacking something, the answer isn't to chase more, it's to embody what's missing. You seek love, then stop performing and become openness. You seek confidence, then stop waiting for someone to validate you and start speaking like your voice already matters. You want peace? Then quit filling every silence and start honoring your stillness like it's sacred. Becoming the energy you seek means making yourself a match for the reality you dream of, not through control, but through alignment. It means recognizing your triggers not as enemies, but as invitations to rise. It means regulating your nervous system, because how you breathe under pressure is how you speak to the universe. It means not waiting to be chosen, but showing up as someone already chosen by purpose. It means healing the parts of you that still whisper, "I am not enough," and responding with, "But I'm learning I already am." Energy doesn't lie, and neither does the feeling you get when something feels off. That's not overthinking. That's intuition trying to break through your conditioning. And once you stop ignoring it, once you begin to trust the subtle, quiet pull toward better, everything changes. Your standards shift. Your posture shifts. You stop over-explaining. You stop fighting for crumbs. You stop needing to convince people of your worth. Because becoming the energy you seek is about remembering that you already are what you've been chasing. You just buried it beneath layers of fear, hustle, and survival. And as you rise into that remembering, your external world starts rearranging to match it. Friends fade. Opportunities shift. Relationships reveal themselves. Not because you're being punished, but because you're finally vibrating at a level that refuses to pretend anymore. This chapter is not about becoming perfect. It's about becoming honest with your energy, your habits, your wounds, your wants. It's about choosing resonance over reputation, authenticity over applause. And the frequency of your future is not waiting to be found, it's waiting for you to become it. So the question is no longer, how do I get there? The real question is, what energy would I have to become today, for everything I seek to recognize me tomorrow? Chapter 8. The Magnetism of Inner Clarity. It was the moment. Isaac stopped explaining himself, that everything in his life began to shift, not because he gave up, but because he finally tuned in. He had spent years trying to be understood by his parents who wanted a safe path, by friends who expected him to stay the same, and by a world that praised him more for his usefulness than his authenticity. But clarity doesn't come from convincing others. It comes from choosing yourself so clearly that anything not aligned begins to fall away on its own. When you are unclear inside, the world reflects back fog. confusion in your relationships, chaos in your emotions, and decisions that feel like they cost your soul. But inner clarity, it's magnetic. It doesn't beg, chase, or over-explain. It just is. It draws in people, opportunities, peace, without force, because it vibrates with truth. Most of us were raised in environments where we were rewarded for compliance, not clarity. We learned how to adapt, not how to align. But clarity isn't about being certain of everything. It's about being honest in this moment about what feels right, even if it scares you. That kind of honesty rewires your nervous system. It silences the urge to perform. It replaces anxiety with direction. And it doesn't come from external validation. It comes from deep internal presence. You want to become magnetic? Get clear. Not perfect. Not polished. Clear. Start asking yourself what drains you and what lights you up. Pay attention to what your body does when you're with certain people. Your nervous system never lies. Start saying no faster. Let the silence after your truth hang in the air without apologizing for it. Get honest about what you're tolerating in the name of not rocking the boat, because sometimes your peace depends on letting it capsize. True clarity feels like relief, even when it's inconvenient. And once you begin honoring that feeling, your life recalibrates. Decisions get easier. Energy returns. People shift. Not because you forced the world to change, but because you stopped distorting your frequency to fit into spaces that blurred your vision. There's something radiant about a person who knows who they are. They don't need to be loud, but their presence is unmistakable. They walk into a room and everything calms, not because they control it, but because they are it. That's the power of inner clarity. It speaks without noise. It leads without pushing. And it reminds us, your greatest power was never in being. Everything it was in being exactly who you are. So the next time you feel scattered, stuck, or like you're losing your center, ask yourself this simple question. What would I see clearly right now if I stopped trying to be understood and just stood in my truth? Chapter 9. Patterns that silence your power. There was a moment for Marcus, a software engineer in Denver, when he realized he was running the same race, but the track kept shifting beneath his feet. No matter how hard he sprinted, the finish line seemed farther away, his energy fading into exhaustion rather than triumph. Every promotion felt hollow, every win tinged with doubt, and deep inside, a quiet voice whispered that something invisible was holding him back. That something was a pattern, an old story he wasn't even aware he was telling himself. Like an unspoken contract signed long ago in childhood or trauma. Patterns are the invisible prisons that silence your power before you even realize you have it. They're not just habits. They are deeply wired scripts running in the background of your mind, shaping your beliefs about who you are, what you deserve, and how the world responds to you. Maybe it's the fear of failure disguised as perfectionism, the need to people please that drains your soul, or the inner critic that masks itself as tough love but really whispers, "You're not enough." These patterns keep you small, safe, and stuck, echoing in your nervous system and dictating your reactions long before your conscious mind catches up. The insidious thing is that many patterns feel familiar like old friends, even if they're toxic, because they give you the illusion of control. But real power isn't control. It's freedom. Freedom from the chains of conditioned beliefs that no longer serve your growth or your peace. The first step to breaking these silent saboteurs is awareness. Catching the recurring storylines that show up in your relationships, your work, and your self-talk. Notice when you shrink instead of expand, when doubt paralyzes you before you start, when you replay painful memories that dim your light. That recognition alone cracks the foundation of their grip. Then comes the courage to rewrite them. Rewriting isn't about fighting or resisting. It's about understanding the root cause, forgiving the past that shaped them, and consciously choosing a new narrative that amplifies your worth and possibility. Imagine if Marcus had realized his pattern wasn't a flaw but a signal of desperate attempt to protect himself from pain he hadn't yet healed. With that insight, he could transform his story from limitation into liberation, because your power is not hidden. It's buried beneath layers of conditioned patterns that silence your voice and shrink your presence. The journey is messy, uncomfortable, and deeply human, but it's also the birthplace of authenticity and lasting change. As you unravel these patterns, you'll start to notice subtle shifts. You speak up more boldly. You say no without guilt. You rest without fear, and you trust your intuition louder than your inner critic. Your energy begins to hum with alignment, attracting people, opportunities, and experiences that resonate with your true frequency. So, here's the challenge and the truth. The patterns that silence your power don't vanish overnight, but every time you choose awareness over autopilot, compassion over judgment, and presence over distraction, you reclaim a piece of your power. The question lingering in the air now is, which pattern have you been living that no longer serves your highest self, and what would happen if you refused to let it define you any longer? Chapter 10. Alignment isn't luck. It's a frequency. It was a chilly autumn morning in Seattle when Marcus, a man in his early 40s, sat on the rooftop of his apartment building, sipping lukewarm coffee and staring out at a city humming with movement but feeling more disconnected than ever. He'd been chasing what everyone called success: promotions, recognition, money. But despite having the titles and the paychecks, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was living someone else's dream, caught in a pattern of shoulds that left his spirit exhausted and quiet. That morning, something inside him cracked open, not like a dramatic revelation, but a subtle, undeniable knowing that luck had very little to do with the deep sense of fulfillment he craved. Marcus realized alignment wasn't about being in the right place at the right time by chance. It was a vibration, a frequency you consciously tuned to by how you thought, felt, and acted every day. It was the invisible thread connecting intention with manifestation, desire with reality. In a world obsessed with quick fixes and external validation, this truth feels revolutionary. Alignment is a practice, not a prize. It's the daily commitment to show up as your authentic self, even when no one's watching. It's the gentle courage to say no to what dims your light and yes to what feeds your soul. It's the quiet recalibration of your inner world so your outer world can naturally follow. When you live aligned, you're no longer scrambling to force outcomes or manipulate circumstances. Instead, you move with a magnetic ease that feels like flow, like the current is carrying you instead of fighting against it. And this isn't vague spiritual fluff, it's grounded neuroscience and psychology showing how your brain and body literally synchronize when your beliefs, emotions, and actions resonate at the same frequency. Misalignment is exhausting because it causes friction. Alignment restores energy because it removes resistance. That means the old narrative of work harder and you'll get lucky is incomplete. True power lies in working smarter, starting with your inner frequency. Think about a radio dial. If you're off even a little, the music crackles, the message distorts, and frustration grows. But when you hit the sweet spot, the precise frequency designed for your unique signal clarity comes in waves, and the world feels like it's responding to your rhythm. Marcus's breakthrough was not finding the perfect job or relationship, but choosing to rewire his mindset to align his daily habits with his core values. He began meditating, setting boundaries, and tuning out external noise that distracted him from his truth. Slowly, the fog lifted, and opportunities showed up not by luck, but because his frequency invited them. This chapter isn't about luck, it's about responsibility. The responsibility to own your energy, to curate your thoughts, and to embody the version of yourself who already has what they want. When you stop blaming fate and start tuning your frequency, you realize you're the signal that everyone else is searching for. So here's the challenge. What is the frequency you're currently broadcasting to the universe? Is it one of scattered noise and self-doubt, or one of clear, unwavering alignment with who you truly are? Because alignment isn't luck, it's a frequency. And when you find it, everything changes. Chapter 11. When you stop chasing, it arrives. There was a moment in Marcus's life when everything he thought he wanted suddenly slipped through his fingers. Like water running between clenched fists, his promotion, the relationship he'd poured himself into, even the restless city rhythm that had once fueled his ambition. He was 29, living in New York, moving fast as if sprinting would keep the anxiety at bay, the fear of not being enough, the urge to prove himself to a world that measured worth in trophies, likes, and dollar signs. He chased success as if it were a destination, a prize to grab, a secret password to unlock peace. Yet the more he chased, the more exhausted and empty he became. One sleepless night, after another meeting where he nodded like he agreed, but felt detached, he caught himself staring out the window, watching a single leaf fall slowly, drifting in the wind's quiet grace. The leaf wasn't fighting the breeze. It wasn't scrambling to reach the ground faster or impress the branches it left behind. It was simply letting itself be carried, surrendering to the rhythm that found it. That leaf held a message Marcus hadn't been ready to hear. Sometimes, when you stop chasing, everything you truly need finds you. This is a paradox as old as time, yet it feels revolutionary in a world wired to hustle, to prove, to accumulate. We grow up learning that worth is earned, that desires must be pursued relentlessly, that waiting means losing. But what if the real power lies not in pursuit, but in presence? What if what we're searching for, love, success, peace, or belonging, has been moving toward us all along, waiting for us to stop running so it can meet us? The frequency that finds you is never about desperation or force. It's about resonance. It's tuning your energy to a wavelength that doesn't strain, but invites. That doesn't push, but magnetizes. Marcus's story is not unique because he was chasing. It's unique because, in that moment of surrender, he finally understood that his frantic efforts were drowning out the signal his soul had been sending all along. When we chase, we often move from a place of lack, needing approval, fearing failure, holding on to outcomes so tightly that life's flow gets blocked. But when we stop, when we release the grip on control and certainty, something shifts. The air around us hums differently. Our hearts beat in a steadier rhythm, and suddenly, the universe's timing feels perfectly aligned with our own. This doesn't mean giving up on dreams or abandoning goals. It means letting go of the anxiety attached to them. It means trusting that your energy, your frequency, will draw to you what is meant for your highest good, even if it looks different from your original plan. There's a sacred rhythm to this, like the ebb and flow of tides, the dance of night into day, the pause between breaths. Marcus began to practice this surrender in small ways, letting conversations unfold without trying to steer them, stepping back from networking events where he felt performative, sitting quietly with himself instead of scrolling endlessly. And, slowly, doors opened that hadn't before. Connections appeared naturally. Ideas flowed effortlessly, and his work began to reflect a depth and authenticity he'd never known. The frequency he was emitting changed from frantic chasing to calm invitation, and in that transformation, life responded. The question this chapter leaves you with is simple yet profound. What would happen if, today, you stopped chasing? If you released the tight grip on outcomes and let life find you? Because the truth is, the frequency that finds you when you stop running is far richer, more expansive, and more aligned than any prize you could pursue out of fear or need. When you stop chasing, it arrives not as a distant dream, but as a present, breathing reality, waiting patiently to meet you exactly where you are. Chapter 12. Healing is a Homecoming. There was a moment for Maya, sitting alone in her childhood bedroom after 20 years away, when the weight of every unresolved scar she carried finally softened, not because the pain disappeared, but because she realized healing wasn't about erasing her past. It was about coming home to herself with compassion and truth. She had spent decades running from mistakes, from heartbreak, from the voice inside that whispered, "You're not enough." But here, surrounded by faded posters and the quiet hum of a familiar night, she felt the first real breath of peace seep through the cracks she thought were permanent. Healing isn't a destination. It's a homecoming, a return to the parts of you left behind, misunderstood, or even rejected. We often picture healing as fixing, as patching up a broken thing. But that's a surface story we tell ourselves to avoid the deeper journey. Real healing looks more like a sacred invitation to step inside your own soul's house, light a candle in the dark rooms you feared, and sit with the shadows until they soften into stories, not wounds. It's the brave act of lowering your defenses and saying, "I am here. I am whole enough for this moment." Because the truth is, the brokenness you fear is often just a piece of the path, not the path's end. Your suffering doesn't disqualify you from love or power. It amplifies your capacity to feel, to grow, and to connect with the human experience in ways surface success never will. Healing asks you to stop running toward the future to escape the past, and instead to fold your arms around all your history, your pain, your triumphs, and say, "You make me. You are part of me, and I choose to embrace you." That choice changes everything. It shifts your frequency from fear to courage, from scarcity to abundance, from fragmentation to wholeness. When you treat yourself like home, you stop searching outside for what's already living inside you, a deep well of resilience, kindness, and wisdom that can never be taken away, only remembered. Healing is messy and imperfect. It's tears and laughter, rage and forgiveness, stumbles and steps forward. But every step toward your true self pulls you closer to that magnetic frequency where authenticity reigns, and you no longer need to hide or prove or pretend. You become the signal, the sanctuary, the peace you've been chasing. So today, if your heart aches from old wounds or the weight of pretending, remember healing is your invitation to come home, where your soul waits patiently, ready to welcome you back with open arms. The question now is not, can I heal? But will I let myself come home? Chapter 13. The Courage to Let Go Loudly. There was a moment for Marcus, sitting in his dimly lit Brooklyn apartment, when the weight of every expectation, every relationship, every should he had carried felt like a chain he could no longer pretend was invisible. He had spent years whispering his goodbyes, pretending that quiet exits meant strength, but deep down, a restless part of him longed to shout freedom into the void. Letting go is rarely silent. The courage to let go loudly is a revolution inside the soul, a declaration that you will no longer shrink to fit spaces that no longer resonate with your truth. Too often, we mistake quiet endurance for bravery, but real courage lives in the uproar of release, the messy, beautiful chaos that comes when you break the scripts handed down to you and say, "I am choosing myself." Because letting go isn't just about leaving people, places, or dreams behind. It's about unlearning everything that taught you to hold on out of fear, habit, or obligation, and instead stepping into the raw, vibrating frequency of your authentic self. This loud letting go shakes the foundation of your life so deeply that the world has no choice but to notice. It might look like ending relationships that suffocate your energy, walking away from careers that drain your soul, or breaking cycles of self-doubt that whisper you're not enough. But beneath every loud goodbye is the profound truth that freedom demands sound. It's not meant to be hushed or hidden. It's meant to echo. Society teaches us to swallow our truths, to smile while our hearts crack, to bury our screams beneath politeness. Yet, the soul knows better. It calls for release like thunder after a storm, clearing the air so new energy can rush in. When Marcus finally said no to a toxic friendship, to an unfulfilling job, to the voice in his head that told him he was stuck, he felt the tremors of transformation ripple through his bones. He learned that letting go loudly is not rebellion against the world, but a fierce embrace of your own sacred frequency, a beacon that pulls you toward a life more aligned, more honest, more alive. The courage to let go loudly invites you to stop tiptoeing around your truth and instead stand tall in your full volume. It is an act of self-love wrapped in unapologetic defiance. And it teaches that healing often sounds like breaking, free from patterns, from expectations, from every invisible chain forged by fear and doubt. What you let go of with noise, passion, and clarity, you reclaim in power, presence, and peace. This kind of letting go is a sacred roar, an anthem of liberation that reminds you, you don't have to settle for whispers when your soul is meant to sing. So here's the challenge. What parts of your life have you been quietly clutching that need a loud goodbye? What would happen if you let your release be heard, not just felt? Because sometimes the only way to find your true frequency is to break the silence and let your freedom ring. Chapter 14. Tuning out the noise of others. It's 11 p.m. in a small New York apartment where Mia sits curled on her couch, phone buzzing in her hand, not from friends, but from the voices of doubt, judgment, and expectation she's absorbed from a lifetime of other people's noise. These aren't just random thoughts. They are echoes from parents who told her she wasn't enough, from friends who tried to box her dreams, and from a culture addicted to comparison, all clamoring for her attention like a relentless static. That drowns out the subtle music of her own soul. Maya's story is the story of so many who find themselves entangled in a web of external opinions, unsolicited advice, and invisible rules that don't belong to them but shape their inner world. So deeply they forget where their voice ends and the world's begins. This chapter begins with the truth that the most dangerous noise is not outside. It's inside, planted there by years of surrendering your frequency to others, tuning your energy to fit someone else's frequency until you lose your own signal altogether, which is why tuning out this noise is not an act of selfishness, but an act of survival and rebirth. The world will always offer you opinions, expectations, and comparisons because that's its default frequency, a broadcast of distraction meant to keep you from discovering your unique frequency that holds your power, your truth, and your joy. But to live the life you're meant for, you must develop the courage to unplug from that feed, even when it feels lonely or uncertain, even when the voices inside your head echo what others have said, telling you to shrink, to doubt, to hide. This process is not about shutting down empathy or shutting out constructive feedback, but about discerning which voices serve your growth and which only dilute your energy. Because not every criticism is constructive, and not every expectation aligns with your soul's code. It requires practicing the art of selective listening, of becoming a guardian of your mind's frequency, a protector of your energy field. Imagine your mind as a radio dial that you have control over. Turn it away from static and noise and toward the frequencies that uplift, inspire, and ground you. It means consciously choosing the company you keep, curating the information you consume, and creating sacred boundaries that honor your inner rhythm. It means catching yourself when you replay other people's judgments like a broken record and consciously switching to your own inner voice. Because the moment you start to tune out the noise of others, you start tuning into your own intuition, that deep, unshakable knowing that feels like a magnetic pull rather than a command. And when you live from that place, your decisions are not weighed down by the fear of disappointing others, but energized by the excitement of honoring yourself. The world may tell you to play small, to conform, or to be reasonable, but your soul knows otherwise. It's calling you to rise in your full frequency, to speak your truth even if it shakes the room, to show up fully even if you risk misunderstanding, to love yourself fiercely even if it confuses others. This is not a journey for the faint of heart, but for those willing to risk discomfort in order to claim freedom, because tuning out the noise means stepping into the silence where your real power lives. And in that silence, you discover that the most radical act of rebellion today is simply to listen to your dreams, your values, and a quiet voice that never lies. So the question this chapter leaves you with is both simple and profound. What noise have you been carrying that isn't yours? And what would your life sound like if you finally turned it off? Chapter 15. When your energy starts speaking first. There's a moment in everyone's life when words stop being enough. When what you say fades into background noise and the real story is told before you even open your mouth. That moment came for Marcus on a humid summer night in Austin, Texas, after a long day of trying to convince his team of his vision, only to be met with skepticism and tired eyes. Exhausted and frustrated, he caught his reflection in the window, a man who looked strong on the outside but felt invisible on the inside. For years, Marcus had relied on his speech, his polished arguments, and his carefully crafted plans to carve out his place in the world. But that night, he realized that no matter how persuasive his words, what really moved people was something deeper. The energy he carried, the quiet confidence or the hidden doubt, the subtle vibration, his presence, broadcasted before the first syllable. This energy is not something you can fake, nor is it something that comes only from achievements or external validation. It's the raw essence of who you are beneath the masks, fears, and expectations, the authentic frequency you emit into the world, whether you realize it or not. When your energy starts speaking first, it changes the rules of engagement entirely. People stop listening only with their ears and begin sensing with their whole being. Your presence becomes a language in itself, one that can disarm hostility, inspire trust, and spark connection in ways words never could. But this is also a profound responsibility because energy is contagious, magnetic, and unavoidable. The truth is, your outer world has been responding all along to the energy you give off, even when you weren't aware of it. Your relationships, your career, your health, they're reflections not just of what you do, but of the energetic frequency you broadcast every moment. When you live out of alignment, nervous, defensive, or scattered, that energy repels the very things you desire. Yet, when you align, even imperfectly, with your true essence, your energy acts like a beacon, drawing in opportunities, people, and experiences that mirror your authenticity. This is why so many spiritual teachers emphasize presence, mindfulness, and embodiment not as abstract concepts, but as practical ways to elevate the quality of your energy. You don't need to perform or persuade. You simply need to be fully, honestly, vulnerably, and let your energy speak volumes on your behalf. It's the energy that shapes first impressions, sets the tone for conversations, and ultimately builds the foundation for lasting influence. Imagine walking into a room and feeling the subtle shift as people lean in, not because of what you said, but because of the vibration you carry. This is not magic. It's physics, spirituality, and psychology working together. Your body, mind, and soul are always broadcasting a frequency, and when you learn to listen to and refine that frequency, you stop trying so hard to control external outcomes. Instead, You become a living force that naturally attracts what you're meant to have. But it takes courage to let go of controlling with words and control with energy instead, because energy is invisible and intangible. It requires you to trust yourself beyond proof, to cultivate patience, and to embrace the unknown with steady faith. The challenge is to slow down enough to sense your own vibrations, to notice when your energy is tight, anxious, or doubtful, and then choose to breathe into spaciousness, openness, and trust. This practice becomes a sacred dance between awareness and surrender, between intention and flow. And the beautiful paradox is this: as your energy starts speaking first, your words become more powerful too, not because they are louder or more forceful, but because they come from a place of deep alignment and truth. When your energy leads, your voice follows with clarity and conviction that no longer needs to convince, but simply to communicate. So, the question that lingers here is, what would happen if you stopped trying to prove yourself through words and began to embody the energy that already knows you are enough? The answer is not found in more effort or strategies, but in presence, being fully here, fully alive, and fully you. So your energy becomes the unmistakable signature of your soul's truth, speaking first and carrying you effortlessly toward the life you were always meant to live. Chapter 16. The Vibration of Self-Respect. There was a moment when Marcus, a successful entrepreneur in Austin, Texas, realized that no matter how many deals he closed or how many accolades lined his walls, he was still battling a deeper question that no business strategy could solve. Do I truly respect myself? One evening, exhausted from negotiating a high-stakes contract, he found himself staring blankly at his phone, scrolling past hundreds of messages and invitations that felt less like connection and more like noise. What he craved wasn't validation from others, but an inner steadiness that seemed impossibly out of reach. He thought back to times when he allowed people to push boundaries, when he said yes out of obligation rather than desire, and how that chipped away at his sense of worth. Self-respect is not just a buzzword thrown around in wellness circles. It's the fundamental vibration that governs every interaction we have with ourselves and the world. It's the quiet boundary that says, "This is who I am, and I will not settle for less." Without it, even the loudest applause rings hollow because the applause doesn't fill the space where self-respect lives. It's the energy that fuels decisions, the backbone behind no, and the shield against toxic patterns that drain your power. The fascinating truth is that self-respect isn't something you earn by achievements or external approval. It's something you generate by honoring your own needs, truths, and limits consistently, even when it's uncomfortable or lonely. It's the vibration that shifts your frequency from being a people pleaser to a peacekeeper within yourself. When you nurture self-respect, you become less available to chaos and more magnetic to calm, less inclined to chase approval and more aligned with authenticity. This vibration is felt before it's spoken through the way you carry yourself, the way you set boundaries, and the clarity of your voice when you say, "This is non-negotiable." But self-respect also demands vulnerability. It asks you to look honestly at the parts of you that have accepted less, that have allowed disrespect, or that have hidden your true self to avoid conflict. That honesty is the soil where self-respect grows, deepening roots in self-awareness and self-compassion. When Marcus finally faced this truth, he understood that his real success wasn't a number on a balance sheet, but the peace that came from standing firm in his worth without apology. And the shift wasn't sudden. It was a frequency change, a steady vibration that grew louder the more he honored himself daily. Every time he chose rest over burnout, said no to energy vampires, or asked for what he truly needed in relationships, his frequency rose. He learned that self-respect doesn't isolate. It attracts the right people, opportunities, and experiences that resonate with your authentic vibration. You don't have to fight for respect externally when you cultivate it inside first. So, here's the challenge. Tune into the vibration you're sending right now. Are your choices honoring the you want to become? Are you speaking to yourself with kindness or criticism? Are your boundaries clear, or do they wobble with every external pressure? Self-respect isn't selfish, it's sacred. It's the frequency that shifts your entire life, because when you respect yourself, the world is forced to listen. And the question that lingers as you close this chapter is this: what would your life look like if your every action began with honoring your own worth first? Chapter 17. Reclaiming the pieces you gave away. It's 3 a.m. when Marcus sits on the edge of his bed, fingers tracing the worn spots on a faded leather journal he hasn't opened in years. The one he thought he lost, but really just misplaced. Inside the endless demands of adulthood and obligation, he remembers who he was before life started asking him to shrink. A boy who dreamed with reckless abandon, who painted sunsets in his mind and believed that the world could hold all of his wild, unapologetic colors. Somewhere along the way, those pieces got packed away, handed over to others' expectations, traded for safety or silence to avoid conflict. Marcus is not alone. Every one of us carries fragments of ourselves we've given away, small but sacred shards of identity, joy, courage, and desire that we misplace to belong, to survive, or to be loved. We don't notice the slow loss because it happens one yes too many, one quiet compromise at a time, like invisible leaks draining the vibrancy from our soul's reservoir. This is the theft that never makes headlines but writes the silent story of so many lives. The first step to reclaiming those pieces is recognizing that you can reclaim them, that your essence is not scattered beyond repair, but patiently waiting for you to call it home again. It's not about guilt or blame for what was given away. It's about awakening to the truth that those pieces were never truly lost. They were borrowed by circumstance and expectation, but you hold the power to invite them back. Imagine a shattered mirror whose fragments still reflect your light if only you dare to gather them. The process is not always graceful. It is messy, tender, and brave. It asks you to step into discomfort, face the parts of yourself you buried beneath shoulds and have-tos, and to love those parts without judgment. This reclamation is an act of radical self-honesty, a peeling back of layers to find the raw, unfiltered you beneath social conditioning, fear, and self-doubt. It means standing at the crossroads of who you've been and who you're becoming and choosing the harder path of integration instead of erasure. The magic happens when you stop chasing approval and start chasing authenticity, when you give yourself permission to be whole again. And it begins with small acts, a forgotten hobby rediscovered, a truth spoken aloud, boundaries redrawn, or simply sitting in stillness to listen to the whisper of your heart. Each reclaimed piece becomes a seed, planting new life in your spirit's garden, growing resilience, confidence, and a sense of belonging that no outside validation can ever replace. The world may have tried to tell you who to be, but you have the final say in who you become. Reclaiming yourself means reclaiming your story, every twist, wound, and victory, and owning it fiercely as the unique frequency only you can broadcast. It means healing the silent fractures and rebuilding your identity from the inside out, anchored in self-love and fierce determination. So the question that lingers here, as you close this chapter and step forward, is simple but profound. Which pieces have you been waiting to find again? And what would your life look like if you finally brought them home? Chapter 18. Not everyone is meant to hear you. Imagine standing on a crowded city street, shouting your truth into the wind, watching people pass by like ghosts, Some glance your way. Others bury their faces deeper into their phones, and a few shake their heads, uncomfortable or dismissive. This was Marcus's story, a once hopeful artist from Denver who poured his soul into his paintings, only to have galleries ignore his work and friends distance themselves when he started sharing his deepest vulnerabilities. At first, he thought it was rejection, but over time, he realized something far more liberating. Not everyone is meant to hear you, and not every ear is tuned to your frequency, and that's not a failure. It's part of the universal design. In a world that pushes us to seek approval, to be seen, and to be understood, it can feel like a crushing defeat when your voice falls on deaf ears or sparks criticism instead of connection. We try to adjust our frequency, our words, our colors, our way of being to fit the frequencies around us, hoping to be heard, loved, or accepted. But here's the profound truth. The universe doesn't expect everyone to receive your signal. And your purpose isn't to convince or convert. It's to express and align. When you try to broadcast yourself on a frequency that others can't or won't receive, you're exhausting yourself, trying to force a signal that's not meant for them. You waste energy trying to explain a light they can't see or a song they can't hear. That energy, that essence of your being, is precious. It deserves to be reserved for the right listeners, the souls who resonate with your vibration, the hearts open enough to receive you without distortion or judgment. This chapter is a sacred reminder that your voice, your story, your truth is sacred. But sacredness doesn't require universal acceptance. You're not here to be everyone's favorite frequency. You're here to be your frequency authentic, raw, and unapologetic, even if that means some doors close and some connections fade. The people who can't hear you aren't wrong or bad. They're simply tuned to a different wavelength, a different phase of their own journey. And the ones meant to hear you? They'll feel your signal ripple through their core without needing explanation. They'll be magnetized to your energy like a compass needle to true north. So the real freedom comes not from bending your frequency to be heard, but from standing firm in your resonance and letting the right audience find you. Because when you do, something powerful happens. You're no longer broadcasting for validation, but for connection. You stop chasing approval and start creating alignment. And in that sacred space, your frequency becomes a lighthouse, not a spotlight guiding kindred spirits safely through the fog. The question this chapter leaves you with isn't about who hears you, but who deserves to hear you. It asks, are you willing to honor your own signal enough to let go of the noise of those who can't receive it? Because your voice is your power. And true power lives not in pleasing everyone, but in fully being yourself, no matter who's listening. Chapter 19. The Frequency of Real Love. When Maya stood at the edge of that old wooden bridge overlooking the river, the sun was setting a burst of fiery gold and lavender, casting shadows that stretched like memories behind her. She thought about the love stories she'd been told, fairy tales filled with fireworks, endless passion, and perfect endings, and how none of those stories had prepared her for the quiet ache she felt inside after years of searching. Love, she realized, wasn't the explosive, uncontrollable force she'd expected. It was a frequency, a vibration that either harmonized with your soul or left you drained and out of tune. She had chased romance like a frantic signal on the radio, flipping stations, hoping to catch the right one, only to find static, noise, or echoes of what she thought she wanted. But real love, she learned slowly, is not about finding someone who completes you or fills a void. It's about tuning into your own frequency so deeply and fiercely that you become whole, and then recognizing that same frequency reflected in another. This kind of love doesn't demand perfection. It embraces imperfection with grace. It doesn't shout for attention. It whispers understanding in moments of silence. Real love is an energy that grounds you, not a drama that shakes you. It's the magnetic pulse that pulls you toward authentic connection, not the addictive high of infatuation or dependency. It's a force that frees you from loneliness by teaching you to be comfortable and radiant in your own presence first. The frequency of real love vibrates in self-respect, vulnerability, and fearless honesty with yourself and others. It's a frequency that demands courage to shed old patterns of fear, jealousy, and neediness, and instead cultivate compassion, trust, and emotional availability. When you're operating on this wavelength, love becomes a sanctuary rather than a battlefield, a place where two souls don't lose themselves but expand together in harmony. It's why so many relationships fail, because people stay tuned to the wrong frequency, trying to force connection through control, fear, or expectations, instead of aligning with the deeper energy of truth. The frequency of real love teaches us that before we can deeply connect with another, we must fully connect with ourselves. It asks, are you willing to listen to the quiet voice within that says you deserve love not because you're perfect, but because you are real? Are you ready to release the old tapes that played stories of unworthiness or not enough, and instead rewrite the soundtrack to years of chasing signs from the outside, waiting for the perfect job, the ideal relationship, the magical breakthrough you? Realize something profound. The signal you've been scanning for all along wasn't out there. It was always inside you, waiting patiently for your attention. Take Marcus, a man who spent decades hopping from one opportunity to the next, convinced that if he just found the right mentor, the right city, or the right formula, success would suddenly materialize. But every new path led to a familiar echo of emptiness, a feeling that no matter what changed around him, something inside remained unfulfilled. One cold autumn night, sitting alone in his small apartment, Marcus finally asked himself a question that cracked open everything. What if I'm not supposed to find the signal? What if I'm supposed to become it? This moment, raw and unsettling, is where the entire journey converges. The recognition that you are not merely a receiver of energy, but a transmitter, a source of vibration that shapes your reality. The universe does not send random messages. It responds to the frequency you emit. When you understand this, the search shifts from external validation to internal alignment. You realize that your power is not in waiting for someone to find you, but in embodying the energy you want to attract. This means stepping fully into your truth, embracing your shadows and light without apology, and standing firmly in your worth, regardless of outside noise. It's the brave work of saying no to everything that drains you, and yes to what makes your spirit hum. The signal is your authentic self, unfiltered, unapologetic, unwavering. When you become that signal, your life begins to rearrange itself naturally. Doors open without force, relationships deepen in genuine connection, and opportunities arrive that resonate so clearly you no longer question their presence. The magnetism you feel isn't luck. It's the undeniable power of living as your true frequency. Yet this transformation isn't about perfection or constant positivity. It's about presence, the willingness to hold your complexity and contradictions with grace. It's the knowing that even in moments of doubt or pain, you remain a radiant source of light. Becoming the signal means reclaiming your narrative from fear, rewriting the stories that have kept you small, and boldly broadcasting your unique energy into the world. It's a declaration that you are enough, right here, right now, and that your existence itself is a beacon for those who need you most. So as you close this book and carry its lessons into your everyday, remember this. The frequency that finds you is not a mystery waiting outside. It is the resonance you create within. You've always been the signal, waiting to be fully heard, fully felt, and fully lived. The question now is simple but profound. Will you turn up your signal and let the world receive you as you were always meant to be? CK with acceptance and grace. Because when you do, You stop settling for love that feels like noise and start attracting the kind that resonates with the core of who you are. This love isn't rushed or frantic, it flows like the river beneath that bridge. Steady, deep, and persistent, shaping the landscape of your life gently but powerfully. It's a frequency that transforms heartbreak into healing, loneliness into belonging, and fear into fearless presence. Real love is not a destination. It's the vibration you carry, an energy you cultivate within yourself before it can echo between two hearts. And the question it leaves you with, as the sun dips below the horizon and the world hushes in that golden light, is this: are you ready to raise your frequency so high that the love you seek is no longer something you chase but something that finds you? Chapter 20. You are the signal. You've been searching for Dot after years of chasing signs from the outside, waiting for the perfect job, the ideal relationship, the magical breakthrough. You realize something profound. The signal you've been scanning for all along wasn't out there. It was always inside you, waiting patiently for your attention. Take Marcus, a man who spent decades hopping from one opportunity to the next, convinced that if he just found the right mentor, the right city, or the right formula, success would suddenly materialize. But every new path led to a familiar echo of emptiness, a feeling that no matter what changed around him, something inside remained unfulfilled. One cold autumn night, sitting alone in his small apartment, Marcus finally asked himself a question that cracked open everything. What if I am not supposed to find the signal? What if I'm supposed to become it? This moment, raw and unsettling, is where the entire journey converges. The recognition that you are not merely a receiver of energy, but a transmitter, a source of vibration that shapes your reality. The universe does not send random messages. It responds to the frequency you emit. When you understand this, the search shifts from external validation to internal alignment. You realize that your power is not in waiting for someone to find you, but in embodying the energy you want to attract. This means stepping fully into your truth, embracing your shadows and light without apology, and standing firmly in your worth regardless of outside noise. It's the brave work of saying no to everything that drains you, and yes to what makes your spirit hum. The signal is your authentic self, unfiltered, unapologetic, unwavering. When you become that signal, your life begins to rearrange itself naturally. Doors open without force, relationships deepen in genuine connection, and opportunities arrive that resonate so clearly you no longer question their presence. The magnetism you feel isn't luck. It's the undeniable power of living as your true frequency. Yet this transformation isn't about perfection or a constant positivity. It's about presence, the willingness to hold your complexity and contradictions with grace. It's the knowing that even in moments of doubt or pain, you remain a radiant source of light. Becoming the signal means reclaiming your narrative from fear, rewriting the stories that have kept you small, and boldly broadcasting your unique energy into the world. It's a declaration that you are enough, right here, right now, and that your existence itself is a beacon for those who need you most. So as you close this book and carry its lessons into your everyday, remember this: the frequency that finds you is not a mystery waiting outside. It is the resonance you create within. You've always been the signal, waiting to be fully heard, fully felt, and fully lived. The question now is simple but profound. Will you turn up your signal and let the world receive you as you were always meant to be?